we are gathered here in Vancouver, where in just a moment Sock Jig, the host of the Sock Jig Sneaker Podcast, will enter the studio and deliver the State of the Sneaker Game address to his podcast audience and dozens of people on YouTube. We have just been told Sock Jig is just about to be introduced. Here is John Cullen, the Sergeant at Arms. Let's listen in.
Ladies and gentlemen, the host of the show.
And there he is, a man who, for some reason, has given himself the name Sock. He's making his way down to the podium now, greeting members of the sneaker game. He's shaking hands with various sneakerheads and cook group owners right now. He stopped to say hello to friend of the show Bridget AI, and also his old friends Kenny Oldhead and Grimace. He has just spotted Hidden New York at the back, and is giving him the finger. Okay then, it's going to be that kind of evening. And now he stopped to talk to someone in the audience. Oh, well, it looks like he's explaining that this is not the Price is Right studio audience. And that audience member has stormed off. Okay, Sock Jig is approaching the podium now. Let's hear what he has to say.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Let me begin by saying that because I'm giving the State of the Sneaker Game address, I will not be doing my usual open where I talk about the same 6 sneakers I've been wearing and the L's I've taken on the sneakers app. All right. Now I'm here to talk about the most pressing question of the year. What's the deal with sneakers these days? Am I right, folks? I mean, you guys hear about this? These sneakers, they're just not as exciting as they used to be. I mean, am I right, folks? Come on, you know I'm right. Seriously, you guys hear about this? Well, you're gonna hear about this. Hit the music. Welcome to episode 68 of the Sock Jig Sneaker Podcast. I'm your host, Sock Jig. You can follow me on Twitter at Sock Jig and on Instagram as well. This is the State of the Sneaker Game podcast episode where I talk about the past year in sneakers and where things are going and where we are in terms of sneaker brands and collaborators, retail world, resell world, sneaker media, social media, everything, all of the above. I always look forward to this episode because I get to talk about the things at a year by year scale rather than week by week. You know, often podcasts are reacting to news from the previous week, and if you take a step back and see the forest for the trees, you can kind of see the bigger picture and talk about that bigger picture with a premise like this. And my disclaimer is, I don't really think I'm the president of sneakers. I'm not the sneaker mayor. I'm just a guy who made a sneaker podcast, and I'm using my small platform that I've built to talk about the things that I like, that interest me. And this is what interests me, I guess. Also, I always state my influences if I borrow a premise, and this premise, it comes from Conan's old late night show where he used to do a bit called The State of the Show. It's supposed to be timed up with the US President's State of the Union, which is late February, early March. I didn't get the timing quite right this year because I went on spring break vacation, but that's all right. You're the constituency in this matter, and so you're getting it now. The other disclaimer is that I only really talk about sneakers that sneakerheads are into, that it's mostly hype and some GRs. I will touch on, the business world and the stock market price and market shares and stuff like that, but I'm not going to go in depth and compare, cleat sales by each company or anything like that. I'm talking about sneakers that sneakerheads like. If you want to go deep dive more onto the business side, friends of the show, Matthew Kish of The Oregonian is a really good writer. You can check out his work there. And of course, previous guest Louis Saucony of Snobette has really good coverage on this subject as well. Also, some topics I may have covered in recent podcasts, and I'm not trying to be repetitive or anything. I try not to cover the same topics that I've talked about previously on this episode, but there are some aspects that can't be avoided, so I do mention them here and there and usually plug that episode. But as I've said before, being repetitive is the hallmark of any good podcast. Okay, that's enough disclaimers. Let's get on with the show. The state of the sneaker game in 2024 is boring, right? That's what everyone says. It's boring. You have to have an opinion on this. What does Ja Rule think about the state of sneakers? Where is Ja? This is a topic I've largely rejected talking about on Twitter because it usually just looks like you're engagement farming. You're just looking for people to agree with you that, yeah, the releases haven't been as good as they have been in previous years. And just reading through the responses, especially to the Z Sneakerheads one, I can't disagree with what they're saying. They're not wrong. Things have definitely changed. There's definitely been a shift in the types of releases. At the same time, there's been a lot of releases, but none of them have been as good, as exciting as they were in the golden age. And that's normal. There's never going to be this continuous golden age. But I'm not here to litigate all that. I was going to talk about, okay, say it is boring. That's the standard that we're in right now. Why is it boring? Who's to blame for the state of sneakers being boring? Number one culprit, the economy. The retail prices have gone up. Before, you could always just buy it, and you always had the sense that because of the state of the sneaker market, that I could always just flip it, get at least my money back. Now, if you're doing that, you're going to be losing $30, $40. So it's just better to skip all those shoes entirely. So the retail prices are going up. The economy hasn't exactly crash landed. It's kind of been a soft landing, but we're not exactly out of the woods yet. So number one culprit, economy. Number two culprit, are you to blame? Me? The problem? Not to get all Wonder Years where I just stare off into the distance and myself as the narrator starts talking about my life. Shit, no one knows that reference. Okay, not to be all Taylor Swift about it. How's that? Is that a better, more topical reference? Yes, you are the problem. You bought too many sneakers, you have too many sneakers, and you're a fucking hype beast. You only like hype, and the hype is gone, and now you're like, I got too much shit around here. I got to get rid of this stuff. Sneakers are boring. But we're also kind of in this changing of the guard intersection between older collectors and newer, younger fans getting into it and not having the same collection, and then maybe not wanting the same collection, maybe, buying Crocs and shit like that instead. But getting older and your taste changing, this is a topic I've covered previously in my sneaker taste episode, so go check out that episode for this topic. But I'm not going to sit here and blame you. Be a hype beast if you want to. You're not the one to blame. We got to blame someone else. We got to blame others. It's the economy's fault. And of course, it's Nike's fault. Nike is to blame. They're the industry leader. It's their fault. It's not my fault. The brand is the one who should be making better sneakers. They're the ones not innovating. They're the ones who are releasing restock after restock. They're the ones in rerun mode. At the same time, they're still making releases harder to get than ever with their shitty sneakers app. So yes, Nike is to blame. So we got that out of the way. So if sneakers are boring and we've identified who's to blame, that's great. What's next? If you just don't like this boring cycle and you're moved on, that's great. That's wonderful. You're wearing what? Kmart shoes now? You're wearing mules now? You're wearing Crocs? Whatever it is, have a great time. If you're happy, I'm happy. If you like it, I love it. All that kind of stuff that you say when you hear a bunch of bullshit and you don't care. But as I talked about in my last podcast episode, in the No Country for Old Heads episode, others are not going anywhere. They're still going to buy sneakers. It doesn't matter what anyone else says. And friend of the show, Jolisa, was on Loose Laces podcast a while back, and she put it best. It said, I still got 2 feet, don't I? So I'm still going to need sneakers. And that's the simple case for the majority of sneaker collectors and people who like sneakers. So that's the real state of sneakers, is that we're in this in-between era. I said that we're in between eras right after Virgil passed and Yeezys imploded. We're still in between eras. There's still some interesting product being released, just not at the pace that we got used to. I was thinking of something. I was like, what is a sneaker that has had the biggest impact since COVID, since post-COVID? And I guess I should have made this an engagement farming post, but instead I save it for the podcast and talk about it here. The only answer that I could come up with is the Anthony Edwards one. What else is there? Everything else has been a restock or is an old sneaker. Say it's White Cement 3s or the Lost and Found ones. Those are from 88 and 85. So the question itself lends to what is a new silhouette that's had the biggest impact and not a retro or a restock. And it's not a Nike shoe because, like I said, what has Nike done? They got a marketing problem, they got an innovation problem, and they're stuck in this restock era. That was their answer for this in-between era that we are in right now. So instead of, what are we looking at long term? What's the next new innovation model? What can we bring back from the past? It was, let's just extend what we did the previous years. Let's just extend the hype of Air Force Ones and Dunks and just restock everything and restock it with a higher retail price and more stock. And that will increase shareholder value. That will also buy us some time. So bring back the hits. Let's bring back all the Dunks that were super limited a few years ago and Air Force Ones that have been vaulted for a while and just bring them back. Even though no one's really asking for reverse orange duck camo Air Max 90, for example. So let's just extend this in-between period we're in because the cupboards are bare. The problem with this, of course, is that it prevents long-term thinking, that you're not doing new and innovating product. And usually Nike is pretty good at long-term thinking, at protecting their models and silhouettes and not letting them be overexposed. And that's thrown out the window. Whatever formulas they've had have been put aside for this restock era. It tells you everything you need to know, like the old rules just don't apply. And the question is, have these old rules been set aside temporarily, or is this just the way it's going to be from now on? So Nike brought us into this restock era, and it's up to them to get us out. But will they get us out? Will that affect shareholder value, which is what CEOs and the market cares about? And Nike should be asking themselves, is this CEO, is he the guy to lead us to this new era? Probably not. Seems like he could be fired any minute now. Wall Street analysts saying this guy's no good. Not to mention, you're doing this in the midst of layoffs and low morale. You're getting rid of people that had built things previously that got you out of this mess. Now they're gone. So I really don't know how they get out of this, this rut when they're, especially in the midst of layoffs and low morale. It's like they got a lot of work to do to just gain the ground to get back to where they were. So if Nike's in this rut, then what are the other brands doing? And my thought is that the other brands are just not on offense, at least like how Nike's on offense. The lone exception is Adidas basketball and Anthony Edwards, and that's a single shoe. No other brands are really interested in taking on Nike directly. Most of them are just like, we're over here, we're doing our own thing. In terms of Adidas, like the global headquarters Adidas, they have a German mindset to this kind of stuff, so I'm not even sure they think about this stuff. Maybe they do. But to me, it doesn't seem like any of them want to go at Nike directly. They don't want to poke the monster. And I get it, to take on Nike requires so much more than the hype world that I'm talking about. You need distribution, manufacturing, retail expansion, even partnerships like Nike partnering with Apple to make a custom Air Max 1 for their iPad launch. That could have been New Balance's spot with Steve Jobs previously wearing New Balances, but New Balance was an underdog back then and Apple was an underdog back then, and now Apple's no underdog. Apple's the top dog, Nike's the top dog, so you only work with other top dogs. But all that stuff, doing all that to take on Nike, it's going to cost a ton of money, and a ton of money is hard to get right now in this economic climate without paying a ton of interest on it. But I'm really curious to see what the long-term vision is for all these sneaker brands, especially the ones that are not Nike. You still need to have a long-term plan for who you are as a brand. Like, do you want to stay as a challenger brand, or do you want to become a market leader? Are you okay with being number 2 and Nike always being at the top? Or do you want to overtake them? If you do, how are you going to get there? In the business world, there's this thing called scenario planning, where you try to plan out what the future could look like for your company so that you're always prepared. It's kind of like a strategic forecasting, and it's supposed to be meant as like a long-term exercise, a long-term goal, not just the overall vision and who you are as a brand, but also what if something happens and how do you respond? An example of this is like at Jordan brand, something that they should have a scenario plan for is like, what if the youth of today no longer cares about Michael Jordan, no longer cares about all these silhouettes? And if that happens, how do we counter that? How do we remind them who Michael Jordan is? How do we reintroduce old silhouettes? How do we make them new and innovating at the same time? That's an example of Jordan brand, but what does Adidas have? What does Saucony have? What does Asics have? What does New Balance have? I don't know, but I get it. Nike is some kind of monster. You don't want to poke the monster. Nike is still the big dog and will be for the foreseeable future. But to take them on, you got to be on offense. You have to counterpunch because that's what Nike does. That's their plan. That's in their top 10 rules that they have from the 80s. There's an executive who made a list of their top 10 rules. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but number 2 is we're on offense all the time. So I just think that other brands need to do this. They need to counterpunch at Nike right now, especially when they're down a little bit. Just like how Anthony Edwards and Adidas did with that one shoe. And because of that, we're seeing better products, we're seeing better commercials, we're seeing better fits online. And that's the answer to how do we get sneakers to not be boring. We need new voices, we need new people, we need new collaborators, we need new stories. We need stories that this generation can make their own. And you just simply can't do that in a restock era. A restock era is reruns. we're bringing back the Fear Pack, the Jordan Fear Pack. Why? Like, what is the reason for that? I know the reason for it. It's because they haven't been dropped in a long time and people may want it and their older pairs are crumbling. That's good. It's fine. That Jordan 3, it's on sale everywhere. How hard is it to come up with a new pack? You're a marketing company. You can literally make anything. You guys made a shoe about Devin Booker seeing a snake on a hike. Like that's their version of new stories. Surely you guys could do something better than that. And former Jordan designer Frank Cook said this in one of his IG stories. He said sneaker buyers are evolving and releases need to evolve with them. But you can't get away from retros because that's what the industry is built on. But that's just my overall thoughts, and kind of the theme of the entire episode is that we need new voices and we need to be on offense. And that's how we're going to get out of this boring sneaker era. I'm going to first talk about this kind of sneaker market that we're in right now. And this is in terms of both buying and selling. First, got to talk about how hyped sneakers have been releasing. The main thing is that these super hype drops are spaced out way more than they were previously. It's almost like they're quarterly now. We always get the big quarterly Jordan drop like the Bread 4 or the Military Blue 4. But we're in this weird spot where there's fewer of these super hype drops, but there's more releases than ever. There's more just GRs and restocks than ever. Previously, it felt like we were getting these hyped releases almost every week. I know it's increased in this last month in May and April a bit, but for a while, the first 3 months, it was much quieter. And in terms of the drops where you were just trying online, like when was the last time we had a domain change release on Shopify? It was probably those Ama Manier 5s, and those were like last year. They were not this year. And as I've talked about, those domain change releases only really happen when a collaborator is releasing a shoe with their own name on it, and they have a decent number of them. Ama Manier, Concepts, or Union are basically the main types of drops that will have that kind of stuff. And because there hasn't really been one this year, it's like, what incentive does Shopify have to modify or change how they do their anti-bot protection? It's been kind of the same state for a while. So any type of mini hype release that gets released, it will still be botted. There are still botters out there, which I'll talk about a little bit. But in terms of how releases are now, sometimes these retailers will just turn off the anti-bot protection because it's like, we want to get rid of this. We have all these Military Blue 4s. We don't care. Just take them. And on the Shopify side, it seems like there's just not enough drops for them to invest a ton more into this other than just like usual maintenance. And to do that, you need a sneaker boom. You need to be back where we were. But the other big difference is raffles have all gone the way of EQL, the rise of EQL. It's gained traction with all those like mid-tier hype releases, like where you have a collaborator, they have their name on a shoe, but they also don't have a super ton of pairs, or they don't have a way to pay for Shopify Plus for $2,000 a month to warrant something like that. So EQL is a much better way for them to release. And these are releases like Joe Freshgoods and even this recent Futura SB. And as I talked with former Shopify CTO JML on this podcast, that Shopify didn't want to bake raffles into their own platform. And that's another reason why we have a rise of EQL. And it's interesting to note that since he's left Shopify and worked on his own, he's now kind of either working with EQL or joined them as an employee. That part I'm not exactly sure, but he's working with them for sure. But there were some stats that EQL posts once in a while, and they posted some stats on the releasing Jumpman Jack releases that they had across recent stores. It said something like there was 70,000 entries and something like 600 pairs. I went to actually go back and look for the photo to reference directly, but it seems like they deleted it. So it was interesting to see stats like that posted. Maybe they got a call, hey, we need to delete these, but honestly, I'm not sure how collecting fees on 600 pairs is super viable for a business long term. I know they do more than sneakers. I know that it's all about drop culture, and I assume that they assume that drop culture will be a thing that keeps growing and growing. But they're here for now, and really your odds are still the same. They're still low. It's like 2%, less than 2%. That could be their motto. EQL, you got a 2% shot, maybe less. In terms of where we are in the sneaker market, in terms of stuff that flips, this restock era has obviously killed prices. It killed prices on a lot of stuff that's going to restock. And it just tells you that holding these sneakers as an investment, that era is also over for the most part. It can still be done strategically if you're good at it and know what you're doing. An example is if you thought to buy up all these Cortez 95s when they were at $300, $400, now they're all like $1,000 plus. There's even like GR versions of this. Like if you bought up a whole bunch of these pink gel Kiana 14s at retail, they're all like 300 plus as well too. But that's hard to predict. And it's like, why would you want to risk all your money in this kind of thing right now? It's probably better invested somewhere else. So even though resale isn't exactly dead, there's always going to be sneakers that resell. The casual reseller thing is kind of dead. It's like, who's going to do that other than the true believers? It went from everything being super money that you can make a ton of money on to you got to work at scale now. You got to buy hundreds of triple pink dunks where the profit is $10 each. You got to be a true believer, or you got no other skill, or maybe that is your skill, the skill of scaling and making $5 at a time. The cook groups and stuff, they've diversed into tickets and vinyls and other things, Amazon FBA. There's still also the world of stolen pairs and fakes and underworld of all that kind of stuff. And I did an entire podcast on that topic alone, so go check that one out. In terms of resale and consignment type of shops, it's looking rough out there for them too. Many have closed in the last year. I expect more to close, including names that you know. Ones that are doing well seem to be doing fine because they're good at being a small business. They're good at catering to their customers, the ones that do want to pay more than what the price is on StockX. Or they ventured into used shoes and are excelling at that. Whatever it is, some are still all right. Others are closing and probably deserve to close. And the apps, StockX and GOAT, honestly, they gotta be hurting. It's gotta be hard going from a sneaker boom to this kind of restock, rerun era right now. I genuinely think that they're not doing that great and that they're tightening their belt, and how they behave and how they add new fees and stuff like that is what is telling me that. They're tightening the belt where they can and just kind of hoping to ride it out until Nike makes it better. One small sidebar I had about this is that StockX, I even did a whole episode on StockX, Hater's Guide to StockX, but you know, the thing that they do now is that if the package is lost on the way, they do not pay insurance at the UPS level for it anymore. So if it's lost, they blame you. They don't have to pay for it. You don't get any money. And it's just like, it seems like they just figured out, hey, why should we pay insurance for this? Because all these resellers who sell on StockX, we can treat them like shit. They're just a dirty ass reseller. And this is kind of across the industry is like this. You can treat people like shit in sneakers. Nike does it with the sneakers app. They treats you like shit and how they release it. Even the Travis Discord and the Jumpman Jack release that was going on. They said every single day, oh, it's going to happen today. It's going to happen today. That's because on a Discord, you can treat people like shit. Travis site, same kind of thing. If they have a raffle and no one wins, it's like, what are you going to do? Take it up with consumer affairs? So what else is there? Botting, I was going to talk about, but really, like, it's at an all-time low. However, it still exists. There's still enough people sitting at a computer all day where it makes sense for them to run it. And Shopify hasn't changed enough where they're playing the cat and mouse game. So the current bots that work are still working. And most of them have probably moved on to restaurant reservations. Backdooring is another thing. Just like botting, it will always exist just because it's human nature. You just have to live with it and deal with it. It's never going away. All right, sneaker media. You know, I always like talking about this. I've kind of had a moratorium on content about content because it's not, always completely relatable. But this is the State of the Sneaker Game pod, so I have to cover sneaker media as well too. And a lot of this, I've already covered a lot of my thoughts on Complex and things like that in previous episodes. I dropped my own diss track in an episode called Sockjig Addresses Enemies, episode 47 or so. The short version of the beef is they were fine with me until I said something mildly critical of them. Then they were not fine with me and kind of wieners about it. But they've been wieners to a lot of people. Trust me, I heard the stories. You don't want me to tell the stories. I have them in a notes app filed away in case I ever need to tell those stories. And really, it's fine because at least you know where you stand with them. So not really worried about it. And it's probably for the best because I talk about sneakers and what it takes to get a sneaker. I'll also talk about sneaker media coverage of sneakers. And these are things that I do that not everyone else does. So, I have a niche, I have a role to kind of play. So if that makes me a critic, so be it. So why would I want the people I cover to always be happy with me? If I say good things about them, they'd be happy with me. If I say negative things about them, of course they're not going to like it. And, I'm just telling what I think. And most of the time I'm telling the truth. If I say they've had hundreds of episodes and hundreds of guests, but only like 4 or 5 of them have been women, I didn't make that up. I mean, it's the truth, but they probably don't want to hear me say that. And I'm not going to make a big campaign about anything like that. I was just using that as an example. But Honestly, it's all right. There's this replacement song called Bastards of Young, and there's a line on there that says, "The ones we love the best are the ones we lay to rest, and the ones who love us least are the ones we die to please." And that's a great line, and I will remember that line, that you don't need to please these people. They can just exist. It's fine if they don't like you. It's all right. It's a point of pride, actually, if they don't like me. It's kind of validation that I've been saying the right things. Anyways, that's the short version. I guess that was the medium version. But when I hear sentiments like sneaker media coverage should be doing this or that, they shouldn't be engagement farming, they should be covering the WNBA, sneaker signature shoes, or whatever it is, I always just think they're just not creating content for you. It's not really the voice of the fans. If you want to see that kind of coverage, you just got to go create it yourself for the love of the game. Complex creates content for the sneaker industry people mostly. You could just listen to what they say and who they talk about and who they name check and all that kind of stuff. It's industry talk more than fan service. It's talking about sources and people who work behind the scenes or the brands themselves. Like, we flew to Nike's Paris events to show you their new shoes. That's a presentation that's not that different than the brand showing it themselves. So there's the element of carrying the water and taking the edge off criticism, but all that stuff, whatever. Speaking on the industry is not bad, and I'm also not trying to compliment them either. It's just fine for what it is. It's industry service and not fan service. Nice Kicks actually does a better job with this because they think more about what a sneakerhead likes or wants to see and think. So they are more the voice of sneaker fans and don't really cover streetwear and fashion and things like that. However, all these accounts, Nice Kicks, Complex, Just Fresh Kicks, or Sneaker News, all that, whoever, they all follow the almighty social media algorithm. They all become algorithm managers. And you see the engagement pattern every single day if you just look for it. I could schedule all the posts right now. Here's the post about an upcoming retro. Here's scheduling a post about a custom dunk that's not even real. It's just like a photoshopped Buzz Lightyear dunk. Here, I'm going to take a photo from KO from ATATF and use it as my own promotion and not tag him, or tag him in a reply afterwards. And of course, we can't go a week without showing some Vomeros that have been customized, made to look like an off-white that Chef Hui guy has done. That's got to be posted every week and a half on the dot. And I don't even blame that Chef Hui guy or whoever these customizers are. People are paying them to make these customs most of the time, and so they make these customs and they post it on their Instagram, and all these social media accounts are just thirsty to repost these pictures because they know it's catnip for people. It's also catnip for them. And that's just managing the algorithm, dick riding the algorithm. That's what the algorithm wants. That's what we got to feed the algorithm. The metrics show that that's what does numbers, so that means that that's what the people want. And often that is true. That is what the people want. They want to see these shitty Buzz Lightyear dunks. And if it doesn't do numbers, then you shouldn't be doing it. And this is where the problem is, because they end up all just copying each other. They all end up creating the same kind of accounts, and they never do anything outside that box, and they never take any chances. They never do stuff for the love of the game. They can create whatever they want. They can gear stuff for fans, for fan service, for whatever they want. But instead, this almighty social media algorithm is kind of followed. They probably want to create content for the love of the game and don't want to follow the metrics, but they got to follow these metrics because these jobs are scarce. Really, like if you think about it, how many people work full-time doing sneaker media? Media in particular, not stores and independent content creators and all that kind of stuff. Sneaker media, there's probably, a dozen at Complex, a handful at Nice Kicks, maybe a few at these Sneaker News and Sneaker Bar Detroit type places. Maybe a dozen, maybe it's 2 dozen. And then from that group of, say, 2 dozen, how many of there are names and faces that you know? It's basically a handful. That's it. So those are the people you're getting your news and voices from. So if there's only like 5 jobs available, how easy is it for someone else to get one of those jobs? It's not easy at all. Job barely exists. And that's why those 4 or 5 people, what are they going to do? Lift up others? Why would they? They would literally be elevating someone who could potentially take their job and work cheaper. So, that kind of stuff I've talked about before. But what I'm saying is when you have that kind of sentiment and you only have like a dozen or so people creating this kind of content, that is why their primary goal is going to be about self-preservation and metrics and not about creating content for the love of the game. I get it. It's your career. So that's why I say that the expectations from these group of people, the sneaker media in general, should be managed, especially from the names and faces you know. That even if they did create the content for the love of the game, it's still only content from 5 or 6 people that you know, maybe a dozen people behind the scenes who just do writing on websites in 2024. It's a small group of people, and it's not getting bigger anytime soon. There's nothing on the horizon that this is all going to explode all of a sudden. Little sidebar I was going to say was, I think if you don't elevate others, it's a huge mistake. Even if it makes sense for the short term, even if it, the industry is not going to grow, it just does not make sense, because you should always be elevating and platforming others. Even if you're worried about your bullshit job, your job might be bullshit, and maybe it's time for something else that's not bullshit, and someone younger can do the bullshit job that you shouldn't be doing anymore. Honestly, most jobs actually are bullshit. There's only so many jobs that actually provide any value to society, and writing or podcasting about sneakers is definitely not one of them. Anyways, what was I talking about? I was talking about platforming others. And if you look at that Drake feud with Kendrick, and I saw a post about this, and it was talking about how no one from the Toronto area, the rappers that you know from that area, were coming out to defend Drake, because a lot of them he had intimidated way back when he was starting out, so no one wanted to stand up for him. Just another example of just being a decent person helping others can help you later on when you might need it. But basically what I'm saying is we need new voices. We need people to create content for the love of the game. And it doesn't matter that the handful of names and faces that you know are not creating that content. We need you to create that content. We need a new generation to usher this in. We need you to make it interesting. The future is always going to be people. It's not going to be algorithms. These engagement accounts that build a platform and never show a person's opinion or elevate other people, they just follow the algorithm managers. It's a real shame. When they have this platform, they could use that platform to have other people have voices and names and faces, something that you get real engagement from instead of this kind of fake algorithm patterned engagement that we're stuck in now. And, I'm not saying anything crazy here. This is why people just create content on their own, and they get way bigger than they would if they got a job somewhere else. So that you could just bypass all that. And so that's why I think there should be no point of saying they should do this or they should do that, because they're not in the game of fan service. They're in the game of self-preservation for the most part. And so really, this is a call to arms for creators to create and for everyone else to support. That's what I did. I created, and I also support. I created something I wasn't seeing. I put my voice out there, and we need new voices, not just the same 4 or 5. We need voices across the board, all over the place, whatever you care for and like, and do it for the love of the game. If you want to see WNBA sneaker coverage, create WNBA sneaker coverage. Look at Jaleesa Nicole and what she did with Black History Month kicks of the day. She wanted to change how Black History Month kicks are seen and celebrated, and she did it. And I've quoted her a few times in this episode, and that's because she is a person who's put her voice out there, and I find her inspiring. And so that's the effect that your voice can have if you choose to go down this path. So, the actual part about content creation and all that kind of stuff is, a whole huge subject on its own and how to do it. But all I'm saying is we need more voices. I encourage everyone who has thought about this, who has thoughts about things that they're not seeing, to go out and create it. And then support the people who do this, because word of mouth is really the only way that the for love of the game type of content thrives. You play a vital role. You have to tell other people this is good. I encourage you to check this out. That person is then much more likely to add it to their rotation, to check out that content, to escape the platform. A lot of these platforms, they don't want you to escape. They only want you in Instagram or only in Twitter and not go to something else. So this is where you, the people, have a critical role in content that services the love of the game. So tell someone they should check out the Saucony Sneaker Podcast. Thank you very much. Before I start on the state of sneaker retailers, I gotta plug my own podcast I did on this topic about the future of sneaker retail. It's a full deep dive on what I think the landscape is gonna be and where they should be going and what they should be doing. And you won't see content like that from anyone else, so please check that out. But a very short summary of kind of what I say in there is that retailers need to make in-store be a very hyper-specific, more focused experience and smaller experience, and everything else goes online. And I give all kinds of strategies and things that they can do. They can make app with a VIP and things like that. So please check out that episode if you haven't. But in terms of the sneaker retailers right now, they're holding on. There's not a lot of money or room to go right now. So you got to do what you got to do to survive. And you see this with boutiques. They got to operate within the confines of what Nike allows. And some are kind of ignoring what Nike allows. You see a bunch of sneakers being discounted the very week of the release. That usually tells you that there's a large number of these. The retailer doesn't have the confidence that they can move them. And so it's better to get your money in early before a competitor discounts them before you can. But the bigger one, of course, you see this a lot, is retailers selling sneakers on StockX early for under retail, for way under retail. And this has changed the sneaker market, as I talked about. It's stores doing what they got to do to survive. And this affects Nike and other stores as well, too, because if they're going to release the Jordan 1 Shadow Low and it's already way under retail on StockX 2 weeks before it's going to release, that tells the consumer that I can eventually get this on sale later, even if I don't want to support StockX. So that has a ripple effect of what our retailers going to do when it comes to their store, when the release date comes, because they have to technically wait, or they could just get rid of it on StockX without Nike knowing. One other thing I want to talk about is something that boutiques lost and is not talked about very much, is that a lot of boutiques and online stores, at one time they could do very targeted Facebook ads and move a lot of their GR product this way. And that, of course, is changed after Apple locked down privacy in late 2022 or so. And then Facebook couldn't easily create these profiles that track customers from their web browsing and their phone browsing and what they like on Instagram and stuff. But before that, and this was even after the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal, but before Apple changed things in 2022 or so. So in that window of like 4 or 5 years, boutiques could create very, very targeted specific ads and target them on Facebook or Instagram, I guess. So if you're, say, an online store, as an example, in Cleveland, Ohio, and say you have a bunch of gym clothing like Nike track pants and hoodies and technical gear, and you have Nike Metcon sneakers in stock, you could make an ad that says, let's target men who are 25 to 35, who like UFC and own trucks and whatever other stereotype you want to do. And they follow, fitness stuff on Instagram, and they live in this part of the town, the area that where my store is located at, and I can offer them free shipping or same day pickup. And it would work. Like, they would create that ad and those people would get those ads and they would respond to that ad because that's who they are and that's where they live. At the very same time, you could have an ad that's targeted at moms who are thinking about getting into fitness again after having a baby a year ago, and they live in this other part of the town, the suburb parts, and they like posts on mommy influencers and stuff like that. It is scary, hyper-specific, and that stuff worked, and it was huge for a lot of boutiques who were aware of this kind of stuff, and they could move a lot of non-hype product this way. But that's all changed, and now you're back to having a bunch of Nike hoodies in store that you got to sell, and it's about to be summer coming up when it's not really hoodie weather, so it's tough out there for retailers. In terms of big box retailers, JD Sports is the one who's kind of elbowing themselves into the market still. They bought Finish Line, and then buying Finish Line gives you a huge foothold in America. And now they recently just bought Hibbett Sports. In Canada, they previously bought Livestock, and they brought in Size stores, which they own in the UK. And then they've been creating their own JD Sports stores as well too. So they have this big footprint that they're building all over North America as a challenger to Foot Locker. And Foot Locker is Foot Locker. They still have this lace-up plan that they're gonna, rebuild all their stores and kind of regain share. And recently they had to kind of delay their plan that they had by 2 years. They're still closing hundreds of stores, and their stock price is still in the gutter and all that kind of stuff. but they've been at least trying something. They've been creating a concept store in New Jersey where it's going to be, the store of the future, and kind of what I talk about in my Future of Retail podcast, where it's more about experiences. So one thing I read is they have this communal try-on area, which fosters connection with the sneaker community, is what the kind of description of it was. So I don't know, communal try-on area made me think of just stinky, sweaty feet. So whatever it is, I haven't seen the store. It's in New Jersey. I'm sure it's coming to a lot of other places. They have been long overdue for a refresh, so it's a good thing if they do this. One other store I wanted to talk about is not really a sneaker store, but is kind of streetwear, is PacSun. PacSun supports a lot of smaller independent brands. A lot of these LA brands like Circulate and others, they are supporting a lot of these brands by having them in store and buying product from them and selling product for them. So that is very cool to see. And so people will make fun of, your brand is in PacSun, but without PacSun, a lot of these independent, smaller places would just close down, especially in this kind of economy. And the next big thing is going to come from these smaller independent brands. It's not going to be, Nike created. It's going to be someone who has their own voice and thing to say. So shout out to PacSun for supporting these smaller independent brands. Before I talk about sneaker brands, I want to talk about signature basketball sneakers and give some brief thoughts on both the men's and women's lines. And my disclaimer is that I don't often talk about this kind of stuff. I'm not that interested in basketball performance sneakers, even though sneaker culture wouldn't be what it is without them. This is still more the area of, say, Nick DePaula or Sneaker History Podcast. So check those guys out for more of this topic. But just going through the men's lines especially, there's a lot of signature basketball sneakers. Adidas has Anthony Edwards, James Harden's, Dame, Trae Young, Donovan Mitchell, and Nike's got its huge line of LeBron, KD, Ja Morant, Devin Booker, Giannis, Wemby, and of course Kobe is its own big huge thing. Jordan has Tatum, Luka, Zion, Russell Westbrook. Under Armour has Steph, of course, and De'Aaron Fox. New Balance has Kawhi, and I think that's it. Anta has Kyrie and Clay. Puma has LaMelo and Scoot Henderson for some reason. And Scoot Henderson was on the Blazers. He was a rookie with a signature. He got one before he even played in the league. And it's kind of maybe a warning. Hey, let's not give rookies before they've proven themselves a signature shoe. And he was a player who didn't go to the NCAA. He went to the G League and played their year. And in his rookie year, he averaged like 12 points a game. And he started getting better, but still, the shoe is awful. And I'm not sure if he will be awesome in the years to come or even be very good. But just a warning about who gets a signature shoe and who deserves a signature shoe, which I'll talk about a little bit later. On the women's side, my disclaimer is that I don't watch women's basketball. I don't watch WNBA. And honestly, it's just on me and the amount of time I have in my day. My favorite sports are NFL and NHL, and NBA I usually start watching more regularly after the Super Bowl, so February to the playoffs. And, I'm Canadian. I'm in Vancouver. There's no team here. We lost the Vancouver Grizzlies. We lost the Seattle Supersonics. If I had a team here, I would watch it much more. It's unlikely the Vancouver Grizzlies ever come back, but if NBC pays the NBA $2 billion to air their games, then maybe the Seattle Supersonics will come back and I'll have a reason to watch. So on the signature shoe side, Puma has Breanna Stewart, Nike has Sabrina Ionescu, Caitlin Clark allegedly, and also Asia Wilson was finally announced that she has her sneaker coming out, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But also Reebok has Angel Reese, apparently one coming out, which she mentioned in the video. And Reebok I will talk about later, so I'll skip that part to the Reebok section. But for Adidas, they recently announced that Candace Parker is an executive now on the women's basketball side for Adidas, so that's good news for them and her. But what I alluded to earlier was who deserves a signature shoe, and what women's star deserves a signature shoe. And Caitlin Clark, of course, signed for big money with Nike, and it was leaked to Shams, the reporter, that she has a signature on the way and she is signing for big money with Nike. So the discourse was, of course, well, what about Asia Wilson, who has been basically the preeminent star of the WNBA for the last 7+ years? And why are others cutting in front of the person who is already the established star, like Sabrina Ionescu and Caitlin Clark, who are, obviously good players on their own right? So then finally, last week it was announced that Asia Wilson has one on the way in 2025. And in the rollout and in the interviews and stuff, it was talked about how she had to wait to talk about it. She couldn't leak it. She couldn't tell anyone that she had a shoe coming. And it was just kind of weird that how there was a difference here between one was able to be leaked to Shams and one could not talk about it, could not tell their family about it, nothing. And the campaign about it was, of course she has a shoe. And just to stop there, you want to celebrate someone who's good and has a shoe, but also I think it is worth talking about the other side of this kind of stuff, that having a campaign of saying, of course she has a shoe, is kind of deflecting all the criticism Nike was rightly getting for ignoring a top player for all these years. That if, of course, she had a shoe, why couldn't you tell us 2 years earlier? Why couldn't that be leaked to Shams or Woj or whoever? Wouldn't it have been a good marketing thing to reward the people who were saying and criticizing you for not giving her shoe that, yes, she has a shoe coming? It was all about marketing rollout and how he wanted to roll out. So, in the way this was sort of, I guess, gaslighting. I think that's the definition of gaslighting. As I said before, I have to look it up every time what that word exactly means. But they're trying to rewrite, of course she had a shoe. Meanwhile, the criticism at the time was very valid. But all I want to say is ultimately the goal of everyone involved here is to grow the game of women's basketball and to make money doing it. That's the goal of the WNBA, the college athletics, Nike making the product and selling the product. And they have this opportunity now where they have stars, and stars are a key part of growing any product. But the question there was, who determines who is a star? Do the stats determine who's a star? Do the people determine who's a star? Does Nike determine who's a star? And if Nike says we're picking who we picking because they went to Oregon or that person is more marketable, to quote Drewski, what do you mean by that? What does marketable mean all of a sudden? Is that very coded now? And so luckily, this has all been gaslit and kind of brushed away for now because Asia Wilson has a shoe, but that's how it played out. The other thing overall for the men's side especially, there's just too many signature shoes. Are people really asking for a Darren Fox Under Armour sneaker? Is this more about a status symbol thing that if you are a player at a certain level, you just automatically get a signature sneaker? Like, it wouldn't be a bad thing if just more players got PEs, player editions. I think it should be treated like kind of almost like the Hall of Fame, that you have to be at a certain level to get it, and anyone below it, you're just not good enough. The Devin Booker shoe is a good example of that. It's just like his basketball game. Something is missing with that shoe. Something is missing with his game. Ja Morant, he's a powerful, explosive player, and he's, of course, the thing is he could be better going forward and you want to get in early. But he's also kind of a fuck up and fucked up his first release by, being suspended immediately, by going on live on Instagram and stuff like that. So the thing with all these sneakers having too many of them, they got to sunset a bunch of them to give room for a new crop. So Nike did it with the Paul George line. There's got to be a bunch of them coming up, like Russell Westbrook or Zion Williamson, and not sure how many more of those sneakers there will be. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the release cadence for signature basketball sneakers. It's usually one per year, geared around the start of the NBA season. And friend of the show, Jolisa Nicole, was talking about this on Twitter, that said that they need to be extended out for certain sneakers, that especially with the Anthony Edwards one, where that is a hot sneaker. We don't want to be just done with it in a few months now. It's only now kind of gaining traction. So let it breathe, let it extend more, give it like 2 years, 2.5 years, which of course is a great idea and works really well when the shoe is hot. And I think even Adidas CEO even said that they're going to, introduce more colors and stuff like that because of how well received the shoe is. But does that mean that it's going to be released in the same calendar year and now the releases are all just compressed together? Or does it mean the opposite, where it's going to be extended out? And on the opposite side, if a shoe sucks, it's better to move on quick. The Ja one, him going, suspended and all that kind of stuff, and then injured, I guess, it's probably better to move to the Ja 2. Kawhi has one with New Balance, and his Kawhi 3 was like basically recalled and disappeared, and they have a Kawhi 4 now, and he's playing, he's not playing, he's injured. So it's hard to sell a product around a player when the player's not around. Same with LaMelo Ball, where He's been injured a lot and kind of more in the news for his bad back tattoo than his ball game lately. But what I want to say is this all sounds great. It'd be awesome if it could be done, but probably can't because of how contracts are signed and structured. So say you're signed for 5 years with Nike or Puma, whoever, and it's worth X amount of dollars and you get 3 signature shoes. So it takes 2 years or so to create the shoe. So let's just say is when you sign the deal, it starts right then. 2 years to create it. And then you have 3 years left, 1 per year. That's 5 years of your deal. And then somewhere along the line, probably, year 2.5, 3, whatever, you got to come to a contract extension agreement if you're going to keep doing it or not. I'm just an outsider. That might be just a naive way of looking at a contract and how they're structured and how it's paid. But just an example that the stuff is fixed and there's money on the line and it's not exactly malleable. You can't easily extend it. You can't exactly increase the dollars or pay less. So if you're like Adidas and you release Anthony Edward 1 and it's a big hit and people like it and you want to let it breathe for 2 years instead of 1 year, does that mean that contract has to be restructured right away? And is that something a big corporation wants to, put on the books to their shareholders in that quarter or whatever the shit they do? So I just don't think these big companies have the flexibility to do this kind of stuff, but it would be cool if they could. And that leads to the last topic I wanted to talk about is this Anthony Edwards shoe and how awesome it's been to see them on a roll, to be on offense, and how the timing has been pitch perfect for this whole release and marketing campaign. Anthony Edwards' game has been hitting the next level. You see him just attacking the rim on these dunks, just doing explosive play. And the theme of this whole episode, you see him all the time. He's always on offense. He's always just attacking. So it's easy to cheer for a player like that. So what I meant by timing is, what if all this was happening and his shoe was 2 years away? It'd be like, oh, it's too bad he couldn't capitalize on these monster dunks and stuff. But right now he can. The shoes are in store. They're restocking. And the last piece is, of course, that Anthony Edwards is a very likable person. His personality is very infectious. You want to root for him. You want to see him on offense. And part of that is great marketing. If you have a good product, then great marketing can sell more of a good product than just average to bad marketing. But if you're really good at marketing, you can shake things up for a mediocre product. But eventually the fate of that product is in the hands of the product itself, like how well it delivers. Here we have great timing and everything. We have a great marketing campaign. We got a great endorser. We got a great product. So everything's hitting all at once. So that's what I meant by great timing. So shout out to Miles at Adidas Marketing, and shout out to everyone on Adidas and that team. Shout out to Adidas North America for letting this team kind of do stuff. Shout out to German Adidas headquarters for letting North America do this kind of stuff with that, and letting it be a little bit different than how all the other campaigns have been. Lastly, I want to say you don't have to be on early on this product. I was on it early. I copped the peach pear at midnight Pacific time, the launch day of the release, within seconds of release. But you don't have to be. It doesn't really matter. You can jump on now if you like the shoe. It's just the first year of the release of the shoe, so there's always room on the broom. And this is a saying that I don't know if it's actually a real saying, but I always say it. I got it from a Liars song, so there's always room on the broom. And the other thing that this Ant Edwards shoe has really done has reinvigorated the signature sneaker basketball space, because it, like I said, it looks like they're on offense. They're on offense on marketing. He's on offense on the court, and they're ready to take on others. And that was essentially the first campaign that they did, was that pitch. So I hope this inspires other people at other brands to go do something next level and go, try to get all that timing right and go be on offense and, do more than just making a shoe inspired by the time you saw a snake on a hike. All right, I'm going to talk about the state of sneaker brands right now. I'm going to go through the major ones. I'm going to start with Nike and split it up between Nike, Jordan Brand, Nike SB, go through Adidas, New Balance, Asics, and I have some thoughts on Reebok as well. And then I have a bunch grouped together into the other category. Basically, I'm going to talk about the silhouettes that they're pushing, their current roster of collaborators, and just my overall thoughts or anything I have top of mind on those brands going into this year and this past year as well too. So first up, Nike silhouettes. Everyone is probably aware of the most popular Nike silhouettes. There's the Dunks, the Air Force Ones. They're pushing the Vomero a lot this year. The Air Max is always in rotation. And after that, it's just, the ones that the ones that are not super popular. And this has been an issue with them for rolling out new models and getting some innovation tracking, in which we'll talk about it a little bit. Their roster of collaborators, they have many. I'm not going to list them all, but the first one I wanted to mention is Drake and Nocta. And it's kind of weird how many models the Drake has with Nocta. There's the Glide, a Hot Step 2. There's some Zoom one too, Zoom Drive, I think, as well too. There's a lot of silhouettes that they've just thrown at the wall with Drake and Nocta. And of course, everything is done in like 18 months and 24 months in advance. So I'm not sure if they can take a break, but maybe it's time to take a break. Maybe it's time to stay inside a little bit, if you know what I mean. There's also, of course, Cactus Plant Flea Market, which is always creating new and interesting things. Union is more a Nike collaborator this year than a Jordan collaborator. And some of the newer ones that they brought in are Bodhi and Jacquemus. They also had a big hit with Cortez, and I know he's got some follow-ups coming this year. So it's good that they're cycling in new names and faces. And, maybe they all haven't been super runaway hits like the Bodhi shoe, but it's still a decent shoe. So they got some stuff cooking, and we need more of that, as the theme of this episode is. One other thing that's kind of a question mark is Off-White. Is there anything left? Is there anything in the reserves for Off-White going forward? I don't know. I haven't seen anything in a while now. And I talked about it at the top, but I just wanted to go back about the restock era again. Like, they just been restocking so much stuff. I have made a small list here. There's Dunks and Air Force Ones and stuff. There's the AirTech Challenge coming back. Even with Nike SB, they brought back a bunch of GRs and even brought back that Court Purple SB. They're also bringing back old collaborators, so it's not exactly clear if they're restocking and retroing the collabs or if they're giving them new ones. This is like Stash and Air Max 95 coming back. Air Max 1 Pada is supposed to be coming back. Huff is coming back. And I think the Huff one is different colors. And personally, I think that's the way to go. Do not try to bring back old collabs. I personally am not a huge fan of that. But it does have a time and place, like with the vote back thing with the Atmos Air Max 1 that they did. But if you look back at that Clot Air Max 1 that they brought back, maybe they shouldn't have brought back that collab, at least in the huge numbers that they did. Or, the other thing that they've done previously is bring back a collab, but kind of erase the collaborator. Like Dave's Quality Meats is no longer, so it's just an Air Max 90 Bacon now. They usually didn't used to do this. They didn't bring back collabs, but the old formulas have been thrown out. And the usual formulas for hypes and collabs is all different now. Just a short version of hype formula might be make something limited, create some demand, feed that demand with some alternative product. Then when you do a second release, you increase stock a bit, whet their appetite. Then you give it a break for a while. Then you go back and start it over again. That's the normal hype demand creation cycle. But as I've talked about, they've kind of thrown that all out just for this restock era that they're in for shareholder value, probably. And I talked about Nike's internal problems and morale is low because of layoffs. Go figure. They're going to lay people off. Morale is going to be low. And especially how they've done the layoffs too, with like the sword just kind of hanging above these employees. And there's a report by Matthew Kish in the Oregonian, and it was talking about how Phil Knight supports the current CEO, even though, in the report it talks about he doesn't exactly have the support of employees right now. And of course, Phil Knight's going to say that. He's got to say that. Otherwise, the stock price tumbles. And this CEO, I've already, made my case that this guy's got to go. About the layoffs, he said he holds himself accountable. But exactly how? How is he accountable? Has he taken the hit? Has he lost his job? No. The other story that was in the news was about Dylan Raasch, the designer of the Roshe Run and the Air Max 270 leaving. And one thing I wanted to talk about was his farewell IG post, especially the last two lines. I have the last two lines right here. Quote, "Eternally grateful to all the individuals and teams I had the pleasure to work with over the years. Some projects I was proud to be a part of." End quote. And at the end, he's got a peace sign emoji. So I read that, and especially that last line, especially that one word, some projects, not all projects, some projects, is hilarious. That's saying a lot right there. So to decipher corporate speak for you, that's saying some of the projects he had me on were complete bullshit and fuck you. That's what he's saying there, just by the word some. He's saying fuck you in a per my last email type of way. Fuck you for putting me on shitty projects Otherwise, you would not say it at all. You would just say, the people are great. This is a great place to be. Thank you for the opportunity. I love you all. See you later. Peace. Bye. But instead, he deliberately said the word some, that some of the projects were pretty good. He's saying the other projects are fucking shit. And so fuck you for putting me on these projects, and that's why I'm leaving. Fuck off. So maybe this is all overreacting. Maybe he didn't have that intent, but I've been in big corporate companies for a long time here, so I recognize it when I see it. The people at Nike who are probably responsible for letting him go probably saw that word, some projects, and saw it as a fuck you to them. And that's fine. They deserve a fuck you. You're letting a guy go who made you billions of dollars, so you deserve a fuck you. And by all accounts, it sounds like it was basically a layoff with dignity. Hey, sorry man, we're phasing out this position, but we have a new position for you in the basement with a red stapler. How about that? You like that job? You want that job? No? Oh, fuck. Well, I guess there's nothing else to do but part ways. So that's probably how it went, even though this guy made them probably billions of dollars with the Raasch run and the 270. And you'd think he'd be settled and has a job for life, but that's not how it goes in the corporate world. A company has no thoughts or feelings. That's why they can do what they please. Only people have thoughts and feelings. And the people running Nike right now, well, we already talked about them and what they're like. But to Nike, it's like Dylan Raasch didn't design those shoes. Nike designed those shoes. Dylan Raasch just works here. He doesn't own those shoes. Nike owns those shoes. And that's just how it is in the corporate world. Tech is like that. Design is like that. Development is like that. You design and develop for the companies. They own the IP rights, of course. You might get your name on patents and stuff if you're lucky, and that's about it. They don't owe you anything other than that, other than the salary you get paid while you're there and maybe some bonuses. The flip side to this, of course, is that we need new voices. We need new people in there designing. We need different kinds of basketball shoes that don't look like Kobe's, instead of where we are right now, where it's the same designer making them all look the same. Hopefully that's what Nike does. Hopefully they have people ready and hungry to take those positions. Hopefully Nike puts them in those positions, and that's the only way we're going to get new and interesting product that all does not look the same. The other thing that was mentioned in that Oregonian article by Matthew Kish is that Wall Street analysts blame Nike executives for where they are right now in the market position, the CEO especially, since he's the one supposed to be making the decisions and the face of the company. And they talk about how aggressive D2C, direct-to-consumer, was a mistake. That he went too aggressive on it, and he's got to go back to these retailers, especially after COVID, when we all realized, hey, maybe everything online is not the way to go right now. And of course, they talk about this whole lack of innovation and new exciting product. And as I said, the Nike trend jacking instead of trend setting is kind of sad to see. They're the ones that should be setting the trends, not following the trends. If they're following other people's trends, then everyone's just basically creating the same thing. At the same time, the same criticisms can't exactly be applied to Jordan Brand, which is its own entity, but not exactly, its own separate company. It doesn't have its own stock market ticker or anything like that. That's all under Nike. So Jordan Brand has been doing things pretty well. They've been setting the bar for Nike. But before we get into that, we'll talk about the silhouettes that they have. Everyone knows all their classic silhouettes. I'm not going to go over that. But what's interesting is that they're trying new silhouettes and trying new ones with the Jordan 4 especially. They've always been, trying Team Jordan style ones, and none of them really hit. And so they're hoping to have a hit with these new takeoffs of the Jordan 4. So they're bringing this net around the Jordan 4, and they're also doing this low RM Nigel Sylvester one as well too. That's at least interesting. They're trying that stuff. They've done this before lots of times. And, I've always said that the Jordan 1 model is invincible. They could do anything to it. They can make it a high, a low, a zipper, mule, whatever they want. The Jordan 1 is just invincible. It's untouchable. People will still want it no matter what. And them modifying the Jordan 4 is this kind of venturing into this territory as well too, and hoping that it's a hit, that they can start creating Jordan 4 mules and highs with big zippers and all that kind of stuff. And the other big change we did see with the Jordan 1s was that they were sitting a bit. So all the ones that have released recently have been sitting. They're available, sometimes on sale. And the answer to that is just reduce the numbers and they will sell out, and that will create demand for the next pair. But because we're in this rerun, restock era, they're just letting them sit, letting them eventually hit outlets. They'll still make money on it wherever, if it's on sale, if it's full price. But the usual formula means that they'll go back to limited sooner or later, and it seems like that's what they're going to do later this year. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me talk about the collaborators a little bit. Number one, of course, is Travis. Travis Scott has got a whole bunch of Jordan 1 lows coming out again. These were apparently supposed to be stopped in favor of maybe a Jordan 7, but seems like plans have changed and they're bringing them back. I've joked many times that the Jordan 1 low is kind of a Dana White shoe, a shoe for young Republicans now, and they're going to love all these pairs. And I talked about on Twitter is like, has there been any other collaborator on one single silhouette that has more than 7 or 8 of them, as it seems like now? And honestly, I could not think of anything that anyone who has had more, because everyone else has like their own signature, like Yeezy's 350's got his name on it. It's Jordan's model. And the best answer I got was Ronnie Feig and the Gel Light 3. And he's done a ton of those and probably way more than 8 or 9. So that's the only one. That's the territory we're in when it comes to collabs on a non-signature sneaker. But he does have his own signature models coming out. This Jumpman Jack was renamed at the last second to T-Rex, and they have this Spiridon Shark one coming out later this year, next year maybe as well too. So it's at least something. I know they're going to make these numbers limited and hope they sell out and, sustain the hype level that they've always been doing. And so far they are. The other main collaborator with Jordan is the James Whitner group. James Whitner himself, with his Alma Maniere and Social Status and all the other stores and brands that he owns. As I said before on the James Whitner Backdoor episode, is that, he is pretty high up there at Jordan brand when it comes to collaborators. A lot of the collaborators and stuff, it seems like he is the one who's deciding who gets a collab and who does not anymore. Nina Chanel having sneakers with Jordan is probably directly related to James Whitner. Eastside Golf, Nigel Sylvester, those guys, I'm not sure if they are or not, but it would make sense. So his influence is far and wide, and that whole court case thing, like nothing really has come of it so far yet, but that kind of stuff is slow. So it could come around the corner, but really it's like people just moved on because we're just kind of used to this in sneakers. There was no charges laid or anything like that. Even though, it's pretty clear in the government document that he was backdooring all this stuff to China and most likely using that money to build all these stores. The other collaborators there's J Balvin and DJ Khaled. I still don't know why they made a ton of those Peach 5s and had them going to outlets. It's like, no one likes DJ Khaled that much. Like, who's the number one DJ Khaled fan? There's surely not like hundreds of thousands of those people. And of course, there's the family stores like Soulfly and Trophy Room and stuff. So that we all know about. And I mentioned on Twitter is that there's no Union Jordan drop this year. And maybe there is next year. Maybe they're just strictly Nike now. I don't know. But noteworthy that it's, off the table for now. The other thing that's noteworthy is them bringing back more classics, like they're bringing back Black Cement 3s, and it always just feels like that shoe that just came out. To me, I was thinking about it, I was like, didn't that shoe just come out? And that came out in 2018, and I guess that's 6 years ago. So the thing about all these retros in the recent years is that the previous ones were shit. The 2011 to 2013 era ones were pretty bad quality-wise. And so the restocks that came 6 years later in 2017, 2018 corrected all those mistakes. They were much better. And so now when they're bringing them back 6 years later in 2024, it's like, I already got a pretty decent pair the last time. And of course, there's new people coming in. So a lot of people did not get a decent pair last time. So I get it. That's the formula. That's what they're doing. And so that's why they'll probably just, they'll tweak one thing enough for the collector types who have a decent 2018 pair to still want the 2025 pair or whenever it's coming out. And that's what they're actually really good at. That's what Jordan brand does for Nike. They sets the bar at. They give the people what they want. You want this classic back and you want it in OG format. You want the suitcase thing that comes with it. We'll give you that. And, maybe you might not like it. Maybe that military blue is darker than you remember because no one literally remembers the 1989 version. But as I mentioned previously, they are seemingly scaling back. They're pushing releases out. This was first reported by Lois Zucchini on Twitter that, they're aware that the numbers have been too much out there and it's time to reduce it. And just normal part of demand creation. And I think it will reinvigorate Jordan brand. For Nike SB, that seems like an okay year. It hasn't seemed like it's been anything special so far. Everything seems to be Paris themed around the Olympics this year. So hopefully more of that stuff comes out and the shoes are good. We obviously haven't seen everything coming out. The restock era, it has not skipped Nike SB. They've released GRs like the black and the white, and restocked wheat and court purple, and even the Chicago SB has been restocked in Europe only. Shout out to whoever bought my pair of the Chicago SB for like $500 US earlier this year. You really did me a solid. I just rebought it back for $195, so thank you so much. For collabs, there's the Verdi one, and the Futura one is the most notable one. The Futura one is one of the better shoes of the year. It looks really nice, but I honestly got to see it in hand. I'm not sure how that canvas material is going to look in hand on foot, so I'm hoping it's good. It looks good in pictures, but Nike SB will always have a good year. They'll always have hype going forward, simply because they're always going to be made in smaller batch numbers, so there's always going to be demand, and sizes are always going to be impossible to get. And I know we see all these like monitors that say there's 40,000 SBs and stuff. I don't think the numbers are crazy. I've always said that those monitors are showing wrong numbers or ballparkish numbers. So maybe they have increased numbers, and even then, I think they're going to probably reduce them going forward. But overall, decent year. I'm hoping that the GRs are nice. I'm not sure what other collaborators are coming out. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of hit after hit collaborations coming out this year. So maybe it's a more of a GR year because of the Olympics. And that's all right. I always hope that SB goes back to doing more weirder shoes and collaborators and less corporate stuff, less Doritos and that kind of stuff. For Adidas, Adidas did really well with their silhouettes of pushing Samba out there, pushing campus and gazelle and terrace culture. That's like, terrace, like a garden terrace and not terrorist. I know they like to continue that to the Superstar, and I'm not sure if the Superstar will stick, but they do have a breakout product with the Anthony Edwards one. So they are doing a lot of things right. And honestly, they're doing better than I thought they would post Yeezy being gone. Even though they still have a shit ton of Yeezys to sell and are supposedly selling them or trying to sell them for like $94 each in huge bulk numbers of 500,000. In terms of collaborators, I forgot to cover collaborators. There's Wales Bonner, there's Bad Bunny, there's Jerry Lorenzo, and a bunch of smaller one-offs. It's like they have a big list of people that's like signed to them, like Blackpink and others, and they don't really do much with them other than just have them signed. Jerry Lorenzo thing, it's got to be disappointing for them. It doesn't create that much buzz for them. I saw something a while back that they might try to extend the contract with Jerry Lorenzo. I've said on Twitter or maybe on this podcast that I think it might be one and done. I still stand by that. I haven't seen anything why they should extend him, but who knows? But it would be great if Adidas could get enough of their shit together to try to challenge Nike and be on offense and be more aggressive at it. But honestly, I just don't know if that German mindset is to be on offense against Nike. And is it more just to be, let's focus on who we are and what we do? North America might be on offense with the Anthony Edwards one, but Germany headquarters will always have that German mindset, in my opinion. I'm just curious to see what their long-term plans are, what their scenario planning plans are. Where do they see themselves in 5 years in terms of where they stand next to their competitors? New Balance, their silhouettes, they always have something new cooking. Every year it seems like. They had the 1906R last year. They're bringing back an old 1000 this year. They made a 991 V2. They even had success with a skate model, the 480 this year. And at the same time, they're still pushing their existing old models, the ones that have been, people wear and people like the 9060, the 990 V6, which I wear a lot. Some of those 860s and stuff, ALD has done those. And even like some of those staple ones like 574 and like 327, like I said in Japan, I still saw a lot of people wearing those. So they have a lot of silhouettes going, even though some have fallen off like the 550 and the 650, and that's normal. The half-life of any type of sneaker is kind of unknown. Some, like the Jordan 1, is super long, and some, like the 550 or even like the Yeezy 350, you think is going to be long and is not long at all. New Balance collaborators, there's of course Joe Freshgoods, who's been used to introduce new silhouettes like the 9060 and this 1000 model. There's, of course, ALD and Teddy Santis himself, who's their creative director. And they're always going to have an ALD sneaker every year. And Teddy Santis is always going to have his name on a bunch of GRs, I guess. They have the musicians, Action Bronson, Jack Harlow. They have Jound, of course, can always be brought back into the mix. Salehi had a limited drop earlier this year, but I know he's doing a bunch of dog shit shoes with Crocs as well, too. But that limited drop, the Salehi one that looked like Vision from Marvel, those ones are like actually exclusive. Like they only dropped on his site and not anywhere else. So New Balance has got the hint, and even with Joe Freshgoods drops, these recent ones, the numbers were a little bit lower, matched the demand again instead of oversaturating the market. So New Balance, on the hype side at least, seems to be balancing the numbers game pretty well. They're introducing a new model every year. They're getting traction on those models. The ones from the previous years are still being used and pushed a bit. They're not just completely forgotten and fall off, like the 2002R. Even the 327, like I said, is a big hit. So they're putting their head down. They're putting out good work. They're playing the numbers game right. In terms of what's not going well, maybe that's too harsh. Let's say what they could improve on. There was a little bit of overkill on the Teddy Santis colorways, and it looks like they got that feedback from shoes that went on sale and discounts and stuff. So it looks like they brought that down to a slower number, but they're still doing them. They still move product, I guess. Releases, this is one where it's not going well. They're still doing these QIT releases on their site, and those are shitty and botted, and they don't seem to care, and they've had that system for years now, so that's something that they can improve. One thing I'm not sure that they can improve on is the sentiment from some sneakerheads, from some people who just grew up with Jordan and Nike, that New Balance is shit and I'd never wear New Balance. I think New Balance just has to kind of turn the page on that. They're just never going to get those people. All they can do is put their head down and keep doing good work, and that's the reward. Who said that? Tom Sachs said that. So maybe, I don't know if you want to listen to that advice. Anyways, you're never going to get New Balance haters to all of a sudden try it on. Maybe you will, but it should not be a thing that you actively think about or market for. The other thing that New Balance is, I don't know, like I said, it's not doing well, but one of their issues is that it's basically a family business. The owner, Jim Davis, and his family own like 95% of the company. If you look up their org chart, you'll see the last name Davis a few times at key position. And that's fine. It's what I would do if I was Jim Davis and had a lot of money and started a company like this. But a family business by its nature is going to be more cautious. They're not going to be as aggressive when it comes to global expansion, because then it's not a family business. You got to hire a lot of other people and put them in key positions. Family business, you can put your family in those positions. And so, as I was saying in my opening remarks, they're not going to be as aggressive when it comes to challenging Nike. And their long-term plans, maybe it's on their board to challenge Nike, maybe it's not. But right now, they got a good thing going, and they're doing a lot of the right things right. Moving on to Asics, their silhouettes of this past year have been, of course, the Gel Kano 14, the 1130, the 2160, and they bring in the Gel Light 3 in and out in, on the periphery if they have to. And their collaborators, they don't really have that many collaborators. There's Kith, and on the fashion side, they have Kiko and Cecily Bonson. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Cecily Bonson, who does like these or flower arrangements on these shoes or something like that. And no one else worth mentioning. And overall, they've gained a lot of traction in this past year. You see a lot of people wearing 1130s and Gel Kano 14s, and they're usually wearing the GR ones. So getting traction on your GR versus collabs, says a lot about yourself as a company, that you could get people to wear these shoes. And it helps that all the GRs of even the Gel Kano 14s, they all kind of look similar. They, silverish, and either it's like a coffee colored or black or a navy, and then the 1130 as well with some shark skin ones and others. Of course, it helps that this early 2000s is a trend right now, and so they have a lot to celebrate that their GR models have been the star. They're good sellers online and in store. The 1130 model is very cheap. It's like $120, and sometimes it's on sale. You can get it for even less. I've seen it for $90 sometimes, and it's a very comfortable shoe. My friend Brendan was telling me a story about how he sees a lot of people in the gym in the New Jersey area wearing Asics. And if you can win the gym crowd, that's awesome. That's the Air Max 270 crowd. you've won them over. That's a big deal. So they've done a pretty good job capitalizing on these trends. And so what they can improve, they could obviously mix in more collaboration. There's a lot of room there with the people that they work with, the collaborators that they work with. They can bring in new voices and new people to highlight their product that they have. I just hope they keep going and they don't sputter out. Reebok I wanted to talk about on its own. I would normally just kind of put it in the other category where I just kind of skim over, but there's one thing I wanted to talk about Reebok. But before that, the silhouettes, they of course have basketball with the Pump and Shaq and Iverson and stuff, and they also have their classics, and that's kind of it. They do have this Reebok limited line where they work with some fashion stuff, and they're all like overpriced, and they don't ever really get any traction or go anywhere, so they at least have that division. In terms of collaborators, they have Jound, and I don't know who else on the Reebok limited side. They will work with some Korean brands, and there's an up and coming brand called Botter, not about actual sneaker botting. Just the brand is called Botter. And so they have things going on, but collaborations is not really what they do. It's more marketing and licensing. And that's what I want to talk about, is that Reebok was bought by this group called Authentic Brands Group, which is a brand development and licensing company. And they own retail brands like Forever 21 and Eddie Bauer, but they are most known for owning the brand of dead celebrities like Muhammad Ali, Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe. They basically go to these families and say, hey, you guys have a lot to deal with. Let us kind of take ownership of the names and we'll do all the contracts and stuff. And, it's probably a good arrangement for them, but they can also then put these dead celebrities, selling vacuums or whatever they kind of want. I don't know exactly. Each deal is probably different. So I don't know exactly what the line is or what they can do and can't do. But this group, Authentic Brand Groups, has a lot of say in that stuff. And they have the same kind of deal with alive celebrities like David Beckham and more famously Shaq. So Shaq basically sold them his name and likeness, I guess, for millions of dollars. And so that's probably why you see Shaq selling inkjet cartridges and shit like that they could basically put Shaq on whatever. Hey, we signed you a deal with this toilet cleaning company. Go ahead, make this commercial. Basically, they can have him go anything because he doesn't actually own the rights to 100% his name. However, when he sold his name, he did go back and reinvest in the same company that he believes in them for this kind of stuff. So why I'm talking about this is because another brand that Authentic Brands Group is the full name, I guess. ABG, I'll just call it. Another brand that they own is called Sports Illustrated, and they bought the name Sports Illustrated, but they licensed it to someone else to actually operate because they had no interest in actually operating a sports media company. They're just like, we want the name of this legacy brand on our portfolio, and then we can use it for branding and licensing because they are a branding and licensing company. And so they were in the news recently because the company that was actually licensing the name and operating as Sports Illustrated for them was paying them the quarterly licensing rate. And they actually wanted to negotiate a kind of a lower payment, or were having trouble hitting that payment because the media landscape is pretty tough right now. And it was reported that the CEO of ABG, Jamie Salter, basically said, fuck you. If you don't pay me, you're a breach of contract. So that company was in breach, and then people were laid off at Sports Illustrated, and then ABG had to go off and find a new licensor. So what that tells you is they don't really care about operating the media company at all. They don't really care about people's lives and layoffs and such. It's just like, hey, you're in breach. Either you fulfill the contract or you're out of here. There's money to be made, and that's fine. But that kind of tells you who they are and how they operate. And this Jamie Salter CEO guy, he's kind of like Michael Rubin of Fanatics in that they're both involved in a lot of businesses that own a lot of other businesses, have a lot of partnerships and deals with other companies. And at the same time, both these people, Salter and Rubin, kind of brand manage themselves as their own name. There's a reason why Michael Rubin wants to be a celebrity, and Salter is kind of the same way, but Rubin is kind of more known for this way. And Salter was even named by Kanye in one of his posts about people holding him back from getting arenas or one of those rants. But these guys want to be seen as these caring philanthropist types. And so when you have this image of I'm a caring philanthropist type, and you also own a lot of companies and businesses, you get to the point where people do not want to say anything bad about you because you could be a potential business partner. And so at the same time, they're not going to say anything about you when you do bad business. If you're a media company right now and you want to write a story about Fanatics or Authentic Brands Group along the lines of what I just said, that they have a long reach, that they can curry favors, that waters down criticism, and that lets them do whatever they want. If you want to write an article like that, you're risking not getting any ad deals from any of those companies under the umbrella of Fanatics and Authentic Brands Groups. But hey, I'm SockJig, and all I can say is this is for the love of the game, so I can say this kind of stuff, right? But why I bring all that up is this is exactly how I think they'll treat Reebok. I think they're in it for the licensing and branding and owning a legacy name on their portfolio, and I don't expect much from them other than what they already do, extracting as much of value as they can from licensing and branding. Right now, they have this licensed X-Men on Club C or, Reebok Classics thing. You can buy the license for X-Men, you can apply it to shoes that you already have. There you go. And that's not anything new. A lot of brands have done this with The Simpsons and other cartoons and Dragon Ball and stuff. And so that's fine. But those brands also do other interesting work. Here in Reebok, I think this is the work. This is the main thing. That they are not going to be that interested in actually making new and interesting product. That's just my opinion. I just don't think a branding licensing company is going to do that. They showed you that with Sports Illustrated. They had no interest in doing that with Sports Illustrated. So on the other side is how they have signed WNBA rookie Angel Reese to a contract. And she posted a video that Reebok was a place with her because of her past relationship with Shaq, and also lets her kind of shine on her own. She kind of has a stage for herself. Whereas if she was at Nike or somewhere else, she would be sharing the stage with other signed athletes. And that is a very good point. And she also mentioned in that video that she does have a signature shoe on the way, but it could be a year or two because it takes a long time to do the development and stuff on there. So that's the counter to the example I gave before, that they're going to be investing in someone, they're going to be investing in a signature shoe and silhouette. And obviously, I wish Angel Reese well, and I hope the shoe works and it's a success, and that she is treated like a star, and that is right, and they do well by her. And she, of course, has to do her part by playing well on the court and being part of the game growing, and even, being seen favorably in the social media culture side of things. Like she was at the Met Gala and stuff. That's a good example of that. So I hope they treat her well, and I hope she's not just treated as someone to extract as much as you can in terms of branding and licensing. Everything else, all the other brands, I'll kind of speed through them. Salomon, they have XT6, XT4, ACS Pro as their silhouettes, but really it seems to me that they've kind of cooling off, that they've lost their hype edge a bit. I'm not sure if that perception that I have matches actual sales numbers, but I don't know. To me, it seems like they've just kind of lost their hype a bit. For Saucony, they're a company that has been around for a long time, and only in this last year or so is when they decided to do something and, decided to have a collab with J-Tips and push a little bit of that and push a little bit into that arena. And, they have their silhouettes with J-Tips, with the Grid Shadow, something, and even this Pro Grid Omni 9 is a nice silhouette. I got the Crystal Caves one last year. That is super cool and, looks like a bunch of crystals. So as I said when I mentioned it about the J-Tips collab previously, their challenge is just getting people to know their silhouettes by name. And so, it's a challenger brand, and they've always seen themselves there and haven't kind of breaking out of that box. Puma is, of course, a bigger company, and they actually have collaborators like Rihanna and A$AP Rocky, and they have signed singers like Dua Lipa and fashion guy Kid Super, who I'm not a huge fan of. I don't know, I just don't want faces and eyeballs on every single thing. But whatever, he's someone who was probably previously gatekept from being in the fashion industry, and now he's in the fashion industry, so good for him. Silhouettes, they have their classics. They've had LaMelo Ball sneaker, which feels like it's kind of fallen off a bit because it's kind of the same version of the sneaker for the last few years, and he's also been injured. They've also kind of gone after Adidas in the terrace shoe kind of area, and I'm not sure how much success they've had at that. One sneaker that they had that I think is pretty nice is the Velofasis or something like that it's called, but at the end of the day, it's a Puma, and it's not something I'm going to rush out there to buy. And to me, Puma is just a company. It's like, here, we have a bunch of stuff and you're never going to get anything overly exciting or innovative. It's just more of the same. And I guess that works for them. They're still in business. You know, I used to say nothing about them at all in this segment in previous years. So I guess me even saying something about them is progress, I guess. Hoka and On sneakers, they're doing well in their space. In their niche running market, you know, they've challenged Nike. They've done well in that, and they're still doing well in that. And the collabs have usually gone well too. They've picked good collaborators. So for both of them, they're doing well for challenger brands. Crocs is an example of where collabs have kind of saved the company, and one of the guys who's in charge of collabs was previously somewhere else doing collabs. You know, at least they're doing something interesting. People like the collabs that they do. At the same time, I don't really give a shit. Luxury sneakers, I think, have come a long way from being straight up knockoffs, and some are still kind of knockoffs, like Balenciaga will still have Asics inspired sneakers, but they've kind of, you know, warped themselves into being their own thing, and I think that's good. Rick Owens is someone who's done sneakers really well for a long time. Some up and coming sneakers, I still see some nice sneakers from Balmain or Lanvin, even if I will never wear those sneakers. Even Axel Argiato, whoever that is, has made some nice kind of Tennessee type of luxury sneakers. So if that's your market, for those people, they're at least doing interesting things in luxury sneakers. For independent brands, I'm not talking about knockoffs here. I'm talking about people who have their own silhouettes, like Mosh or John Geiger and Juan Wilson. And with independent brands, often the barrier is not the brand himself. It's usually just sneakerheads finding it hard to try something new in footwear. And I'm a victim of this. I think about this myself, and I just like what I'm used to and what I know. And, you know, we don't really do this in clothing. I will go try a new clothing company, no problem. But for sneakers, it's a harder sell. But I really like the sneakers I got from Juan Wilson, and it's something that is worth supporting, I think, because these are people. These are not nameless and faceless brands. So if you're invested in them as people, you'll then want to support them as people. And as I said, we need new voices. And so this is a path and avenue that has a lot of room to grow, but I understand the barriers are still high because the prices are going to be high when you make small batch stuff. So if you can support it, I recommend supporting it as well too. So that's the episode. That's the state of the sneaker game in 2024. This is a long episode, but really the premise of the episode just generates a lot of talking points and takes. So that's a good thing. It gives me a vehicle to talk about things in a bigger picture point of view. So I'm not going to apologize for the content. I'm not going to apologize for the length. I'm sorry, but apologizing is something I just don't do. So I hope you enjoyed the takeaways. The takeaways were we need new voices across the board. We need to support these new voices. We need to be on offense all the time. But the number one take is that you should go fuck yourself.